Guys,
Hello, Briat.
Ryan, Haribo,
Greetings.
what a surprise.
So I'm going to hand over to you today. So you can you can drive.
Okay, there was one saying which I had remembered, which goes that whatever happens to you or your situation or your kind of environment, don't let it define you, let it refine you. Or you could say it could either define you or refine you. And I like that because when we identify with our situation, we pretty much let it form who we perceive ourselves to be. And then we act according to some kind of protocol which we've made up for ourselves, and then we have to follow it. And then, but if you use it as a element of refining your character, then these same situations just actually help you to move closer to your true self, and it can actually help you etch away at these false notions that you have of yourself. So this is something that
Yes,
has been in my mind a little bit, and I think it's a really nice meditation and something to get into.
beautiful.
Mm.
So just to reiterate what you said is not letting your circumstances define you, but letting it refine you
Yes.
or to find you. I
Mm.
like all of that. That's really good.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So, do you have any questions or?
So I think that a good start would be is that we're seeing how things define us or how we've let them define us. And a prime example of that, which I think pretty much anybody can relate to, is how the way we were raised as children, that that in adulthood we acting in certain ways because when we were children our circumstances defined us because we did not have the intelligence and the emotional maturity to be able to let it go the other way. And while I was
Yes.
having some lunch today, I was actually this thing spontaneously occurred to me because my one son, he said there's something he didn't want to eat, and then he said no, you have to eat it. And then why do I have to eat it? And then kind of we just kept quiet. But I was in my mind popped up the answer that oftentimes parents give is you have to eat it because it's healthy.
Uh,
And then what occurred to me is that why is it that people think that healthy food has to taste bad? It's because when you were a child, everything that you thought tasted bad, your parents said it's healthy. So there
yes.
your mind had some kind of connection to it. And in your adulthood, now you have this false notion healthy food doesn't taste so good. So
True.
I just thought this as a
What do
very
you?
simple example of how circumstances can define you. And then now you're an adult. Now you look, there's so much tasty, healthy food available, but you have this notion that it can't be good because it's healthy. It can't taste good.
Yes.
So then you don't even try it. So now it's defined you. And who I am is like, no, no, I'm not so much into healthy food. And then you don't really embark on this journey of really taking care of your body better. So I think that's a
Sure.
nice example for that.
Yeah. Um. So um, using that in pertaining to today and today's circumstances and not being defined but being refined by today's circumstances, how would you how would you suggest that you let our circumstances refine one who's interested?
Yeah, I think that
How?
it can refine you if you it's a way how you deal with what is happening. It's not about what is happening. And if you're applying methods of reflecting and introspection and also keeping a keen eye on your internal state, like how things make you feel, and also your internal dialogue and checking whether it's positive or negative, then you can see whether it's actually defining you or refining you. Particularly if one has a fear response, I think that's a telltale sign of something that's busy defining you. And I think if one is feeling inspired or challenged, and one is feeling ready to take a challenge, I think that's a healthy attitude for somebody who is using a situation to refine themselves. So I think it's not the only way of checking it, but I think it's a good characteristic that one can identify.
So you talked about checking in on your emotions,
yeah,
and watching your inner dialogue. And so just to drill a little bit deeper into both of those,
okay.
What would your suggestion be in watching your inner dialogue?
Just being aware of what you're thinking and what the end is of your thinking. I think women may be a little bit better at this than men, but when what you're thinking now, where is that going to lead to? You don't have to actually follow the whole train of thought to be able to check where it's going to end up at. And then just deciding, is that where I want to be? Is that going to help me? Is it truthful? And is it even necessary? So
yeah, you said the one thing that I would throw in there about that is as well, a famous Terence McKenna quote is, and you can play with the numbers here, but 60% of the time you're thinking and 40% of the time you're being thought. So
you're being thought.
You're being thought. There's automatic thinking. There's, there's times when you're having a creative thought, you're the genesis. And then there's other times when there's a thought that's coming to you through your inner dialogue that isn't you thinking. Yeah. It's you being thought. Some other part of you is talking to you. Can you shed any light on that?
Yes, I think that we adopt a lot around us, especially in childhood. We know that children are like sponges. So we sit in front of most kids in my generation and before, or maybe not before, grew up with televisions in the house. So you're sitting in front and you're absorbing all of the stuff, or even in previous generations, it's the radio. So it's sound that you're exposed to. It's primarily, I think, the influence is more sound. And then these sounds, they go into your subconscious mind and you identify with certain of these things. And even when you're having a conversation with some people, if you know them kind of reasonably well, then you can actually see how certain things that they're saying, where they got them from. Like somebody, let's say they're very much into a series, I don't know, maybe they're into The Simpsons. So then you'll hear them quoting The Simpsons often in what they're saying, but they're presenting it as their own thought. But actually and even if you're very in tune if you're more intuitive and you can feel very sensitively, you can also feel the hollowness when that happens. When the person is talking, they basically just play a tape in their mind of some kind of thing they recorded. You can feel a disconnect from that person with you. From heart. Yes.
Yeah.
You can feel it.
Very clear. There's also another part of the inner dialogue I'd like to point to, and some people point to it as the negative bias. And the negative bias is a survival mechanism that's there to protect you. So any kind of past trauma or anything that you're afraid of, the negative bias is a survival mechanism that interrupts all other survival mechanisms, will interrupt any other programming, thought, or anything else. And a survival mechanism should probably do that if it's worth its salt. It needs to let you know something right now.
Yeah.
And that the theme of it is, so there's a negative bias that is presenting our fears to us, making sure, do you see this? Do you see this? And it's the thing that happens when you go to cross a street. All little kids run out into the street without any concern for the curb. And every mother's always telling them, look both ways, look both ways. And as an adult, you can be very busy in your mind and get to the curb, and then something stops you and you look both ways. That's something that reminds you of what's out there is the survival mechanism. That's just one of the functions, just to give you an idea. So I'm curious too, that if I'm going to call it the negative bias, 60% I'm being thinking, 40% of the time I'm being thought. The negative bias is part of the time when I'm being thought. And its themes are, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with them? What's wrong with it? And all the reasons why it won't work out. So those are the four things that's all it's ever saying to you. So, and as a survival mechanism would. And if you can't distinguish between a survival mechanism in your head of your fears and you and what's really happening, because it's this could happen. Could you see what's going on here? This could happen. You know, you had some trauma historically, and it looks like it could happen again. So are you aware of this? And we don't realize it's a warning system, as opposed to we kind of feel like it's instinct, or it's this is happening. You know, look, you know, I'm fearful and all these things are happening right in front of me. Do you have any kind of thoughts about managing that system? Have I given you some correct bits to be able to work with?
Yeah. One should be able to distinguish between what is actually beneficial for yourself and what is not. And anything that's not beneficial, then one should change that, remove it completely. So as you mentioned, like some of this negative bias can actually be beneficial. For example, when you hit a curb and then you're looking at the traffic. So, but then there's a lot of negative biases, as you've mentioned, which also cannot be, which is not beneficial. Like when there's opportunity that you don't want to take because of some insecurity, but that's presenting itself forth in your consciousness as a protective mechanism. But actually it's an opportunity to grow. So that's the opposite. So
right. So just to interrupt you there is that when it comes to a job, and that, you know, what it's doing is it's saying, do you realize that you could fail here?
Yeah.
Do you realize you could fail? And if you fail, can you handle that? And if you're like, okay, thanks for sharing, I feel the fear and do it anyway, then you're saying, yeah, I can handle it.
Yeah.
So, okay, so that's a good example. Keep going.
Yeah. You took the words right out of my mouth. That's a really good point, is that fear of failure, and that we think that by making a mistake, then we become a mistake, is also that's a mistake, because a mistake is also an opportunity to learn. And in a sense, like just broadly speaking, the only mistake is really not taking advantage of a mistake to learn. But otherwise, the mistake in itself is not really such a big deal. But you should also be able to assess risk properly and not take unnecessary risk. And that's another thing, which one has to apply your own discretion and intelligence.
Yes.
And for example, if the risk is very large that you might kill somebody, then that's not a mistake worth making, because that's a mistake that price can be very large for. So you should use your intelligence as well. But if we just zoom it in a little bit more local to our kind of situation right now, a lot of the inhibitions that we have towards making mistakes are actually mistakes which are negligible, and oftentimes we have a skewed perception on what the result might be. Whereas another person who doesn't have that problem, they say you walk on a stage and then everything's fine. But another person, they've got this thing in their mind that if I walk on stage in front of these people, I might forget my lines. And I think it happens to many speakers that they actually forget their lines, but nobody notices because they just kind of pick up on something and they go. But another person has already in their mind created this whole scene of I'll forget my lines, I'll start getting nervous, and I'll have a breakdown on stage. And then that actually happens because they've premeditated this. Whereas
I've done that.
Another person that doesn't have that crippling fear, then they go on, they forget their lines. Maybe they also feel a little bit afraid and think like, oh crap, okay, what do I do now? But they don't sink into that because they've not really fueled that scene. And then they just pick on something else, or they just say, I forgot what I wanted to say right now anyway, and then they continue. And then people appreciate that.
The Achilles heel on that, when you're in front of a group of people and that you do lose your place, is when you become self-conscious. And that embarrass, like, you know, and you start, and you can virtually just feel yourself, your mind and your connection to everything just drain out your feet. And you're connected to nothing. You have no access to your brain. It's really like being letting go to be completely self-conscious is really an interesting experience. Just one other point I wanted to make is that because you use these words, I'm going to fill it out a little bit, is the inner dialogue, the survival mechanism's job is to reduce the risk. It's always looking at reduce the risk so that you're safe. Are you sure this is the risk you want to be taking?
Mm.
And then you know, rightly pointed out is discernment and taking risks that are worth taking. So that's right in line with the thinking that I have. What added bits would you have from there in maybe in managing these things?
In managing them.
Managing the conversations, you know, when it comes up for me, what's wrong with me, what's wrong with them, what's wrong with it, and all the reasons why it won't work out.
Yeah.
When that kind of stuff comes up, an assessment of your surroundings, how do you manage that?
If I know why I'm there and what I want to do, then that's all I need to remember. That's all I need to remember.
Yeah.
As long as I don't forget that.
So you override it.
Yeah, you override it. And you have to have something very simple and something very easy to remember, something very tangible and concrete.
Why?
Because,
why does it need to be easy to remember?
Because if you're in anxiety and you're a little bit baffled by a situation, you need something easy to go back to. And something, if it's very abstract, it's much harder to connect to it and ground yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The place that I go is also when I'm listening to the things that are going on in my head, and when it's about me and about things not working out or me not being good enough in some kind of way, or a negative outcome because it's important to me, is being able to look at what's true. Just because it's going on in my head does not mean, and I'm afraid of it, doesn't make it sacred, doesn't make it true, and doesn't make it real. More often, people make it real by interacting with that and being afraid of it, and the very outcome they don't want, they end up creating. Yeah. And then there's, you know, for example, would you agree with that?
I do agree. That's a nice point.
Yeah. So I don't know. Once again, in the idea of shortening our videos, how would you, like the last segment being about how to take care of yourself and your inner dialogue and being more.
Could you repeat that last sentence, please? Oh, someone muted. There we go. Could you repeat the last sentence? That's the one I missed. Somebody's muted.
Yes. So, what was my last?
We're saying about taking care of yourself.
Oh, so in this segment of where we are now, this last segment of the video is that where we are now as a society and the things that are going on in regards to our societal change.
Happened again.
Can you think of any reason, or like how to manage that? Not reason. How would you manage these circumstances?
The current circumstances and our internal dialogue about that.
Yes, like where we are now in dealing with our internal dialogue and being grounded in ourselves.
Mm.
Any last thoughts that are specific to, like, people are, you know, we're being organized, we're at home, there's lineups for food. There's a lot of information about what's going on. And so what would you suggest in regards to managing that?
Okay. So you've got your internet browser open on your internet, and then you start Googling something, and then there's all these adverts that come up. So you don't go and click on each one of them. Because when you look at something, you think, am I even interested in this? Is this going to help me? Is this beneficial? Or is this even going to help me accomplish what I want to accomplish by coming onto the internet in the first place? So when the mind, also like all these pop-up ads, and some of them they play. Some pages you open and the video even plays automatically, which is very annoying.
Yes.
I hate those ones.
Yes.
So some thoughts are like that also. So, but then you can go and look for it and you can go and put it off.
Yes.
So, but you also
sometimes you have to hunt. You have to look around for where that button is.
So you might think about, okay, you're thinking, oh, there's this long queues now at the shop. My food's running out. I have to go to the shop. Okay. then your mind might go in a loop about that. Oh, it's going to be so intense and so many people, and then you'll be like this and that. So then, like a child, it keeps repeating itself. You can actually turn to that thought and say, okay, thank you, I heard you, and it's true, it's going to be a challenge. So, but I'm going to do it now because I have to. And that's that.
Yeah.
And you
And
just
I've
say,
got,
okay, I've heard
got
you.
this.
I've heard you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you
Yeah.
tell yourself that positive. So you can't just ignore it. It's like a child. Sometimes a child you ignore. Sometimes a child you give your attention and you acknowledge. Sometimes with a child you
Yeah.
have to negotiate. And sometimes you need to give in also. So it will take practice to know when to do what. And your mind is just like a child. So when it's saying something that's true, then obviously you have to acknowledge that truth that's in there. But
Yes.
then you need to make a choice to respond positively to it. Like, it's going to be a challenge because I know myself and how I deal with crowds, and people lately have not been so very nice. So I know it's going to be a challenge, but I'm going to tell myself I can do this. I'm going to put on a happy face. I'm going to go out with a good intention, and I'm going to be tolerant, and I'm going to be peaceful, because that's what will actually help serve people. This is an example. And if your mind
Sure.
suggests something that's not true, then you can just say that's not true.
Yes.
It's another way.
So then for my,
yeah.
my last thoughts about that would be is just being, you know, I'm not my circumstances. And as I was saying to you earlier, was that what's changing is society. What's changing is man-made. Is we've made up a whole bunch of things about what society is, and there's and some of those things might be changing. So, but the thing that's the same is that all the planets are still going around the sun. All the nature is working exactly the way that it always has, and and being able to get in touch with that. My connection is to all that is. My connection is to creation. That is solid and normal and reliable. And what's changing and shifting and having little starts and twitches is society. And not having and society is completely made up. So money is made up. You know, all this how we organize our society is made up. So all of that can change, and you're going to be perfectly fine. So that's not the issue. And so it's easier to stay connected to, and that's solid for you as society starts moving around and doing different things and shaping itself in different ways. You can actually still be grounded in something that is absolutely concrete. Any last words there, Briat?
Stay positive. Always keep an eye on what's going on inside yourself and be honest and authentic. And stay positive, and everything's going to be fine.
In the end.
Yeah.
And if it's not fine, it's not the end.
Yeah.
Thank you, my friend. So a short one today. So I enjoyed this very much, and we'll see you very soon.
Yeah, see you tomorrow, hopefully. Thank you very much. Haribol.
Love and light, my friend.